episode of 305 Vox Populi here in the town of Miami Lakes. I'm Mayor Manny Cid. We got a great guest today. We have Lowell Dunn with us. How you doing, Lowell?
Pretty good. Yourself?
All is good. All is good. Thank you for coming on. And I think the folks are going to have a treat here today because the Dunn family goes hand in hand with the history of Northwest Miami-Dade County, the history of Miami Lakes, Medley, Hialeah Gardens. As a kid who grew up in this area, I can tell you the name Dunn, I always remembered it because it was everywhere, right? On 49th Street, on 103rd, here in Miami Lakes. So for you, I'm sure that your family name, the history, the generation 3, right?
Correct.
There's a remarkable story behind that. So talk to us about if you can go into where that history started and why. What's the why? Why Northwest State? Why grow roots here? Why build the family business here? How did that happen? How did it all come together?
Oh, that's an interesting. I'll try to keep it brief, but Dad, who was from North Georgia, was working up in Detroit at a car factory, and one of the guys there said, "You're a young man. What are you doing up here in the factory? If I were you, I would go down to South Florida." And Dad said, "Why?" He goes, "Because all the elderly people are moving down there, and if you go down there, you can become a mortician, and you'll have endless business." So that was at the morning break. He didn't punch back in. He got on a DC-3 and flew down here, and tried his hand at dealing with the recently deceased. Didn't work out very well, so he got into the contracting business. But that's why we're down here, because of that guy in the factory who told him to come down here and take care of the people that are passing.
That's amazing. So getting that advice over there in Detroit, especially back then, Detroit, was the car mecca of the world, and making that bet of saying, you know what, we got to try something different, and that didn't work out for him.
No.
How did it go from moving from that career that didn't work out maybe too well to the successful business that has existed for decades and decades, and that's had a hand in the development of Northwest State?
Well, Dad was thoroughly educated. He went to the 8th grade 3 times, so he never got past that from North Georgia. So he only had a vision of, what can I do now that could, last a lifetime. And so when he was around here, he noticed they were building gas stations everywhere. And there were the excess fill from the gas stations. He went over and found the people who were building the houses, the house pads in Miami Springs when it was just beginning. And he would strike a deal on both ends, make it cheaper for both, and he would make a larger profit in the middle. So that's how he got into the dirt business. And then he got into the excavation business because he started building roads. And that started within Miami Lakes, one of the properties that we recently sold to Lennar. He had purchased that on a checkerboard farm out, basically, and paid as he went. And that's how he became an excavator and digging lakes. So Miami Lakes and Hialeah Gardens were the 2 places where he did that type of work.
That is phenomenal to go from what he was told in Detroit, and then moving on from that, mortician, right? The first, moving on from that, getting into the dirt business, the fill business, building roads, and then some of the lakes, or a lot of the lakes that exist in Miami Lakes, Hialeah Gardens, especially in the.
We dug them for the Grams. Now, there was a milkman story in between.
Okay.
That actually a longtime resident of Miami Lakes, Jim Curry, who passed away probably about 10, 15 years ago. He worked for MacArthur Dairy. And so Dad worked for MacArthur Dairy for a short period of time in between those jobs. But when he got into the contracting business, he started realizing that, you have to control your dirt. If you don't have the fill, you're not going to be able to build the roads. And back then there was, a kind of like a good old boy mafia type of deal. And he wasn't part of it. He's never been part of the group, never been part of the clique. He's always been on the fringe. And so that's why he ended up going out to source the dirt himself, and in order to have the material to build the roads. And we built, I think it was called Peter Pike Road, which was the Palmetto Expressway. We built all the overpasses, provided the dirt for that.
Wow.
Dug all the lakes in Miami Lakes for the Graham family. The Grahams are just absolutely phenomenal people back still ours with Stu at the helm.
Wait. So every lake in Miami Lakes, that fill, that the dirt that came from those lakes, helped build the Palmetto?
No, the fill that helped build the Palmetto were the borrow pits, which you see the lakes, the retention ponds along the lakes or the overpasses.
Yes.
That's what they called them. They called them borrow pits because you borrowed the material from the lake to build the overpass.
Fascinating. But the aggregate that you got from the lakes in Miami Lakes, what did you do with that?
Built Miami Lakes. I mean, because when Miami Lakes, when I was a kid, 154th Street stopped at the Palmetto. You had to have a swamp buggy to go any farther west. So all of that, all those housing needed the fill. So you would dig the lake to produce the fill to build your house pad and your roads. Otherwise, it would be swamps.
So we got the story of one parcel, but how did it all turn into? Because you guys were one of the largest, or still are one of the largest landowners, right, in Northwest State. I know you've sold a lot throughout the years, but how did he transition from the fill, building the roads, building the pads, to being a landowner?
Well, part of it was like the Indian Mound here in Miami Lakes, which is at the Cuesta, I believe, Indian burial ground.
The highest natural point in Dade County.
Yes, great place to go camping when I was a kid. Okay, there's stories about that, but we don't have enough time for that today. But so the residue effect of after mining the lake is the perimeter around it. The reason the Indian Mound exists today was when he bought it, he thought he found like a great deal because it was so high, you had so much fill, and it was the same price per acre as the land next door. So he thought, well, hey, I got a better return. And not until he started excavating it, they said, whoa, wait a minute. You can't dig out. This is an Indian burial ground. So that's why it still exists today. And so when he realized that and said, whoa, I have a residue after I sold the dirt, and on that one, just enough to pay for the property itself, maybe, you end up with this real estate. And that's how we end up with all these lakes everywhere, because it's the residue left after the excavation. And then fast forward to 20 years ago or so, he was thinking, well, town has now encroached on everything. What do we do with these lakes? We fill them. And that's what we do in Doral, Miami-Dade County, Medley. And that's what we're doing now.
That's interesting. So a little bit of the history for a lot of the folks that don't know, there was a moment before I-75. You guys owned all of that. And if you could talk to us about the history of the building of I-75, I don't know if it was an eminent domain or if it was some sort of deal that was brokered, but then the bridges got built. If you could walk us through the history of the building of I-75 through your property, your family's property, and then the building of those bridges. I think that history has nobody really talks about it, you know?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting history because when the FDOT came and did the taking of where I-75 is, it bifurcated or cut in half our properties from the Indian Mound to Indian Lakes, which is on the east side of the property of 75, and then Indian Isles North and South, which is on the west side, which is now, I believe, Lennar built that as well.
Yep.
So when they took it, we're cattle. We've been TLC, Timberland and Cattle, was one of our companies, and we've been cattle since I was a baby. And we've had cows in Hialeah Gardens, which are now condos, cows in Miami Lakes, which are now houses. We only have a little bit left. But when they took that, we didn't have access to get to our cows. So part of the deal was we would build 154th Street overpass. And that's why that was built, to connect our properties. That was all part of that deal. So we can get our cows from one side to the other.
Fascinating. So the family business, your dad was in MacArthur, was in the fill, was in the aggregate business, buying land, cows. What other lines of businesses is the Dunn Corporation involved in?
Well, when I say dad was the front man. You have to have the somebody in the back holding everything together, and that's Mom. And Mom's 88 years old, still comes into the office 5 days a week. Just phenomenal. She's just not only is she a very astute businesswoman, but she's one of the kindest, hardest women you ever met in your life. And I'm not just saying that because she's my mom, but she was always holding everything together. He was the guy that would go out and make the deals. and she would make sure that everything worked. So when I say dad, I'm referring to that they're a team in the true sense of a team. So we're also, like I said, the cattle business, oil and gas, renewable energy, and the future, which if we have time today, we'll talk about, is the future that can put literally Miami-Dade County on the map worldwide for the future. And that's all part of that Dunn family legacy that we've been working on all our life.
That's phenomenal. And talking about your mom, and I've heard stories in the past how hard she works, and you're right, how kind she is. And just hearing it, I think for young people at 88 years old to come in every day to work and not say, I've made enough money, I've done this. No, to understand that there's a bigger purpose, a generational purpose. And it's one of the things that we talked about before, having a generational impact. And I think the other lesson is diversifying your portfolio, right? So having these different lines of businesses, these different things, and having that vision to go forward and sustain that name. So yeah, if you want to talk about what's the future, I know you are into the renewable side with floating solar panels, where there are some airport lakes.
Yes,
right?
East of the airport.
But what's that future look like?
Okay, well, the future looks like and when we talk generationally, what we talk about is that we don't look like I was telling you on a week to week, and that's the problem we have with a lot of people that we deal with nowadays, is they think instant gratification, and really to have any longevity to an organization, you have to think generationally. You don't think quarter to quarter like the public companies do. You don't think year to year. You think decade to decade, generation to generation. And when you look at it that way, and you look at it through your worldview through that lens, it changes a lot of what you do. You don't do certain things that would benefit you today that shortchange you with the benefit for long term. And that's very difficult to teach. It's very difficult to bring on people that think that way. When we interview people to be part of our organization, we talk to them like family. We tell them we're going to treat them like family, and we do. And we make them, at least we ask them, will you be here the next 20 years? If you're going to leave in a year or 2 years and go jump, don't even bother. I want you, if it works for you and works for us, for you to be here for the next 20 years. And that's how we look to hire people. We look to bring them in and be part of the family.
That's phenomenal. So you were talking about putting Miami-Dade on the map. You want to let us in on that?
Yes, absolutely. And part of that has to do with the county's waste to energy. I know that's been a lot in the paper. It's in Doral right now. It's antiquated. It's the most expensive facility in the system. And I say in the system.
I've been there. I've seen it. So.
It's literally a nightmare. And you hear the people who want to tear it down and rebuild another one there say, well, these people moved to the nuisance. I believe that's a Jeff Burkow term, that they moved up next to it, so they got to stay with it. The issue is that there's that plant is inefficient and needs to be replaced. If you're going to replace it, why don't we put it somewhere where the municipality wants it, where it has less impact on people, and it has an opportunity to be part of something much, much bigger. And that's what I'm talking about. In Medley, there is a property that we own that is already land use approved for waste to energy and other facilities. At that property, we call it the MEC, the Miami Energy Complex. That would host the waste to energy, it would host floating solar, and it would host hydrogen. And you hear a lot of talk about hydrogen being the fuel of the future for big industries. It could power steel mills, cement mills, buses, heavy equipment, not for cars at this time, but heavy equipment and heavy use, industrial use. So the issue is that green hydrogen is such a far-flung idea, because you cannot produce green hydrogen because you need something that's green to produce it, whether it's solar, hydro, wind. What the unique situation here is that with the waste energy facility, you can use the electricity that's the byproduct of that plant to power the hydrogen facility. coupled with the floating solar. So it would be 100% green, true green, not blue, not gray, but green. That green hydrogen can go to produce and fuel the school bus fleet. It could, the metro bus fleet. Like I said, the steel mill down in Homestead, the brand new one they're building, the cement mills. So when you put all that together and have that as in one place, it's nowhere else in the world.
Wow, that'll definitely, the waste to energy, that'll definitely put this county on the map, and that'll improve people's lives, right? Because I know the amount of folks who are upset by what's happening in Doral. I think there was like a controversial vote recently on the commission, and I know there's going to be some changes on the commission, so I think there's going to be opportunities to make this that much more better. So thank you for sharing this, because that definitely is a major change in the way that waste gets treated here. But turning it into energy is a complete game changer.
Well, turning it into energy, and that's where I want to be clear, is that waste to energy is not something that you do to produce energy. It's not something like solar panels are put out there to produce energy. Windmills are put out there to produce energy. The energy is a byproduct of disposing of the waste. So it isn't something you look at and say, hey, I want energy, I'm going to go burn garbage. That's not efficient. But rather than getting compensated like the county is now with either avoided cost from FP&L, which is, less than 3 cents, or find some place that you can wheel it to, which they're selling to the city of Homestead, still at less than what it would benefit by using it on site with a hydrogen facility making green hydrogen, because that byproduct of that green hydrogen, what you make from that electricity, is far more valuable than either of the two that the county are pursuing right now.
But it'll also power, like you said, the heavy equipment, which is a major industry here in our community. So, no, thank you for sharing that. I think that's definitely very forward thinking, and that's what we need in the county, right?
We do have some great county leaders. We got a great county commissioner, J.C. Bermuda, is coming in for District 12. It's in his district, both the Doral and the Medley piece. He is somebody that I've known for years, and he is one of those people that really do what's best for the people, and it's not his own pocket that he's looking after. He's looking after the citizens of Dade County. So the county is blessed to be able to have him on board.
He's a good man. He's a great friend. So you got that right. So Lowell, I know the kids have some questions for you, and here before, like I said, the name Dunn, what it means to Northwest Dade. I think there was 3, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but there were 3 families that were instrumental in Northwest Dade. You're talking about the Grahams, the Capolettis, and the Dunns. Am I correct?
Those you just named 2 really great families as well.
Got it. So, but those are
the 3.
The 3. So yeah, you guys, we've had on here. We had Stu Wiley, we had Phil Wiley, we had Robert Metter here, Rob.
Yeah.
And I think today you're hearing from somebody who has a rich history, but is also showing you all the importance of diversifying and looking forward. A lot of people that might own land or do something, they do it forever, and maybe they're constantly looking to improve. So, what questions do you have for Mr. Dunn?
Okay, so I have, what is the future Miami Lakes going to look like after you're done with all your projects?
The future of Miami Lakes, as it involves our projects, we only have 2 parcels left in Miami Lakes. One of them is the Indian Mound, and the other one is a commercial piece. The commercial piece, I know there's been some parties that have looked at it in the past. Personally, there was one of, you have your favorites, and I look at it and I say, I put on my Town of Miami Lake resident hat, what would I want if I was there? And the 2 that come to mind were a Publix shopping center, and then a Mount Sinai medical facility. And personally, if it was me, I would rather have the Mount Sinai medical facility because, and I'm not going to throw any shade on Palmetto General Hospital, but if I'm on the side of the road at 154th Street, take me somewhere other than Palmetto. So that's why I would say on that parcel. On the Indian Mound itself, I know we've talked over the years about working together with the county and the town to make it a park. That's still an option. If not, it'll be a really exclusive residential development that all the backyards around the mound would back up and preserve the mound, because the mound is a park now for the town.
Yep.
And that would be a really cool place to live.
Yeah, I think right now, correct me if I'm wrong, I think right now you sold the properties north of the mound, and it's called
GT Homes was the buyer.
Got it. It's Palma del Lago. I think that's what it's. Palma. They have a name for it, but it's GT Homes, which is out of
Canadian.
Canada.
Yeah, great guys.
Yeah, and I think they're planning one between.
What part of the town is this in?
It's in the west part of the town. It's just east of 87th Avenue.
Yeah,
the parcel of the mayor's talking.
So
about.
Matter Lakes is a little north of that. So where
154 and 87. Right?
yes. So if you guys look it up real quick, I think it's called Palma del Lago. They already have a website and all that, but I think it's about 30 plus parcels, and they're planning like a bunch of
Very high quality builder.
1.5 to like $2.7 million homes.
Out of my price range.
Definitely. So yeah, what other questions? Good question. What other questions do you guys have?
How do you think the projects you've worked on for Miami Lakes have benefited the community?
Well, the projects that we work on, we bring it up to a point of entitlement, and then we sell it because we're not builders. We're not the people that go vertical. I think the Dunwoody Lake parcel, Satori, that Lennar built, was a phenomenal project. When you have something that of high quality and of high value, it brings more tax revenue to the city, and it doesn't put a strain on the services, less than obviously than the income. So that was probably the biggest one in Miami Lakes. And then the other one with the GT Homes is like I said, real quality developer, and the product is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, with Satori, what's interesting is a lot of incredible families, great friends of mine, all live in there. But it's also helped revive our economy, right? There was a while there where the town's economy wasn't moving too much, right? There wasn't a lot of new places, new things. So Satori brought a lot of new energy into our community that we needed. And I think you're seeing a progression because of Satori, because of what's happening around Town Hall. And I think it's all been positive. But yeah, there's a lot of young families that live in there. It's like kind of like what Miami Lakes used to be in the 70s or in 80s, that it was all young families raising their families. And there was a while there where we kind of became stagnant. And now you're starting to see that the circle of life happening all over again. And Satori was one of those, so anything else you guys have for good questions? Put them on the spot. They put you on the spot. But those are
one thing I would like to say though is for just as overall is that you have to really, and I speak to the I mean, I used to be a young kid, right? Okay. If I was young, what would I want? What advice would I want? Is that is think big, because you don't want to accomplish something small. You want to think big, and if you don't reach there, you're still going to be bigger than if you think small. So you got to think generationally. You got to think of your family, and I guess the most important thing is your worldview needs to be something of God's view. You got to put, you have to be guided, and if you want to have any book to follow the Bible. If you follow the Bible, everything will be fine.
Put God first in everything you do. You got that right. So, Lowell, any questions you got for me? I know they turn it around. They love this portion because it empowers the guests. So anything you got to throw my way?
Well, I found out you were term limited, which is kind of disappointing. No lie about that. But what are you planning on doing when you leave here?
Great question. I love public service, but I love my family more. So I can tell you, I won't do something that'll impact them. I would love to do something maybe in the county, maybe. I don't think I'd do something in the state. I still don't know yet. I gotta finish off those 2 years, but I'm definitely 100% going to run for something else in public service because I love it that much. And I'm not saying I'm the greatest, but I'm pretty good at it. And yeah, I love to see that keep going forward. But a lot of prayer, asking God, because there's times that we want to do things and then you realize that those doors close because there's another one that he's opening, and at the moment we might not understand it. So I definitely go to church often, and I pray about it, and I ask God for guidance. So we'll see where that road heads. But yeah, definitely God's going to be in that driver's seat.
Well, he'll definitely guide you, and I say this because typical politicians, there are obviously two kinds. There's one, and all of them have targets on their back. So the ones that are doing it for personal gain, they don't mind the target on their back because they have a goal. But somebody like you, or like I said, like JC, who are doing it for the people, us non-elected officials really appreciate what you guys do, because it is a sacrifice for to take that kind of arrows being slung at you and your and the family and everybody else. So it's really nice to be able to have people like you in positions of leadership, because it does well for the community and it does well for the youth.
I
It
appreciate
sets an
it.
example.
Appreciate that, Lowell. Anything else you got for me? Any other questions you want to throw? That's why they love doing it, because a lot of folks don't get to ask elected officials.
What do we want to ask them if they have any questions for you?
Oh, I think last week you guys had so last week they interviewed me and they had a bunch of questions. Were there anything you guys had left
But
over?
if I had to ask anything, I would say, how do you guys make sure that you work together to help the town of Miami-Lakes further?
Great question, right? So I'll give you an example. And Lowell was right. So he brings up his properties to the point of entitlement. So I'll give you an example. Satori, when that was being built, Lowell negotiated with the town for several things. The developer has to pay, I think it was about $300,000 to go to local schools. And today, because of that money, like recently, we went to Bob Graham and we paid for, with that money, $30,000 to revamp their entire cafetorium. So now they're able to put on shows with 2022 equipment, which is phenomenal. And we're doing that at every single school. So I think sometimes, for example, Lowell might come in with a project and we might have a different of opinion, but it's part of that negotiating process. And at the end of the day, if you can come up with something that everybody can be proud of, and I think Satori was an example of that, it'll happen. So Lowell's done the same thing with the parcel where the shopping center's at. So for another example of that, I wasn't on the council back then, but when Lowell came in for those approvals, part of that approval was, hey, you get to build a shopping center. But as part of the approval, Lowell ensured, and with the town working back and forth, that if that shopping center gets built, that there's going to be space in the shopping center for a
senior center. And that was Mom's idea, by the way.
Yeah. Kudos to Mom.
Yeah.
So those are ways that developers work with public servants in a transparent fashion to come up with these types of development agreements to allow properties to be developed, but at the same time, the city gets to ensure that our residents are taken care of. So there's a lot of fees that get paid. For example, Satori paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, not only of new revenue, but of impact fees for roads, for parks, for police. When Satori got built, we added 2 new officers to our police department. So those are the types of things that end up happening. I don't know if you wanted to chime in more, or anything I missed on that.
No, you did good, because that's what we always try to do when we have a property and we're getting ready to sell it. We like to work with the town or the city or whatever community and say, what is it that you need? Let us work together before we sign this deal so that everybody's happy. It's just because it's always not about the money. First of all, it's always about what Mom wants. Okay.
Very true.
And as long as that's accomplished, then we can work on other things. And that's for these add-ons such as the.
Yeah, but that's why it's so important, I think, for the audiences to hear about it, because typically you hear about a big shopping center coming up, and all you're thinking is like, whoever the developer is or whoever the people involved in it, they're the only ones getting money, and you never really hear the other part of it. So you don't get to see like, okay, but they're making sure that this is gonna get built. They're making sure that this demographic within the community is taken care of. And when you don't hear that, it pretty much kind of demonizes the whole industry that's just development. So that's why a lot of people would just say, oh, developers, they only care about themselves. But when you hear this, I think it's important to know that this part, it doesn't sell, because this doesn't sell. The good things don't sell, but it's important to say them.
Yeah, like the Manning's hammock, the mound in the middle. When Lowell mentioned it, it was part of, correct me if I'm wrong, part of the Satori development agreement, right? The town has it now, and because of that agreement, So that's how it works back and forth, and
Yeah, the agreement triggers certain things. So as soon as the first permit was pulled, that person who pulled the first permit, which was Lennar, was responsible for A, B, C, D, etc.
Yep.
So yeah, and that Indian Mound, if you guys hadn't been there, it's just a phenomenal, beautiful piece of property.
I know you know a lot of the history there, which I know we've talked about in the past, but it's literally the most significant archaeological site, if not the main one,
the highest point in Miami.
in South, in Miami-Dade County. So it's 25, 27 feet above sea level.
Something like that.
And I've been out there and it is amazing. I know Lowell's been out there many, many years back, and I think there's even been moments where the Seminole Indians, who I believe have taken on the legacy of the Tequesa Indians, they've done ceremonies out there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, real funny one is I tell people, I said, funny history on that was that I've buried a 14-year-old girl out there. And I kind of leave it like that for a minute, and they look at me and they start dialing 911. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Back in the 50s, a park or whatever, the park ranger, whatever they called them back then, had dug up a grave and took a skeletal remains of somebody that was out there. And he was dying. And he finally said, I got to get right with the Lord. And so he called the Indians and said, look, I want to give what's left of this, skeletal remain back. And they reached out to Bob Carr.
Yep.
And said, Lowell, would you mind reinterning, reburying basically the remains? And I said, absolutely not. I mean, this was all news to us as well. And so we had a ceremony out there, and it was 87th Avenue was already open, and it was on the west side of the mound, and we dug the hole, and we started placing in the remains. The Indians was around with their smudge, which is like a smoke, burning reed, and it was like deathly quiet. You could hear absolutely nothing. No cars. The cars you would have seen, but the wind must have shifted to the west because you couldn't hear them. And he says some kind of prayer in his Indian native language. And they said, go ahead, let's start covering it back up, right? So I took the shovel, threw the first shovel full of dirt on there, and this massive black crow just screeched and came swooping down and went, flew out. And then all the sounds of all the other birds and the cars and all of a sudden came back. It was really a scary moment.
Wow.
Very ceremonial.
Yes.
Wow.
So I did bury a 14-year-old girl. There were witnesses, and she had been dead for several hundred years.
Wow.
Already.
And that was with Bob and the Seminole tribe.
I believe it was the Seminole tribe. Yes, it was Bob and then some elders from a tribe.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. Wow, that is no. That's so when you drive by there now, you guys can envision. That's wow.
Me out there digging a hole, burying a 14-year-old
No,
girl.
the story in general.
Was that during the day or the night?
It was during the day. It was in the middle of the day.
Let me ask you, now that you shared with us, that's any other cool stories like that you could share with us?
Well, when we did camp out there, we would take a machete to the old trees in there, and we'd kind of create like a totem pole looking. So when we bring people out there, they would think that the Indians created these totem poles, but it would be kind of fresh. And there was one time we were out there working the cows, and I was with my son and some of his friends, and I had bought some arrowheads from up in Dahlonega, Georgia. I guess they were made in Taiwan or something like that, so I took little stickers off. So I was teaching the kids how to search for Indian artifacts, and you'd have to search for the mark on the tree where the Indians shot the bow and arrow, and the arrow would have broke, and you search down below for the arrowhead, and we found perfect ones, several perfect ones that I just conveniently buried. And they went and told all their kids, and the teachers were talking about it, and I had to explain to them that it really wasn't a true arrowhead.
Got it.
Made in Taiwan or something.
Got it. But what's interesting, if you do it, I know it's not allowed anymore, but I know back in the days, when folks did dig, there were some real arrowheads.
I believe there's some down in City Hall here.
There are. If you guys haven't seen it yet, we have a display downstairs.
Priscilla Alamon?
Yes.
She's a really good caretaker of the assets.
That is phenomenal. So Lowell, two things in closing. Now, after hearing your family's entire history, your focus today is renewable energy. So if you could tell them a little bit of what you do in terms of the floating solar panels, how you're focused on that, how you're one of the largest companies in the world that does this.
We've done it. We've done more than anybody else in the U.S. We're partnered with the largest company in the world. What we do is we want to leave a legacy. We want to truly leave this place a better place than we found it. Mom and dad have set up certain structures that are going to see to that the benefits of our hard work will go back to the community. It will help certain demographics, whether it's the elderly, the orphans. Like the Bible says, the orphans and widows. You take care of them. And so for our part, what we're doing, continuing forward, is the renewable energy. We do floating solar. We only do floating solar. Nothing on the ground, nothing on the roof. And we do that because land costs are so expensive, because floating on water, it's more efficient because of the cooling effect of the water on the panel, and it's usually closer to where the power is consumed. So the floating solar, we do have the traditional energy, the oil and gas as well. Solar will never replace oil and gas. Oil and gas will always be needed. I know that's not a politically correct thing to say, but we'll always need oil and gas. I mean, look at what we have right here that's made out of oil and gas that can't be made out of solar or wind or bio. So it's a necessary evil. It's necessary to work together, and they can be worked together and make this future a better place. So the floating solar aspect of it is, we've done them all over the world. I tell people we only go as far as New Zealand. We won't go further than that, halfway around the world. But we've got 4 of them under construction right now in Central Florida. And it's just, when you look at it, it's something, you're using a non-performing asset, creating power at a lower cost that doesn't impact the environment. That's just something to be proud of.
Congratulations. That's definitely incredible. And the other thing I wanted to see if you could add for the youth, some inspirational words, some motivational words, because I think you hit it on the head in terms of thinking with a generational perspective. And a lot of times I was in a meeting yesterday, and it happened here at the podcast before, where I had somebody mention the word microwavable, that they see. A lot of the youth today thinks that everything is because of social media, that everything's microwavable, right? That your future, you put it in a microwave, you turn it on, and it comes out. No, but they don't understand that generational point of view. So some closing words of inspiration, motivation to that future generation.
Well, I think the first starts with finding a good company to work with. And I say with, because I never like to look at the people that I work with as working for. They don't work for me. Okay, you want to find a company that looks at you and says, you're valuable. You're valuable for your knowledge. You're valuable for your ability to produce. So that's the first thing as far as when you're seeking employment. You want to find somebody that you can work with. And I go back to it. You first have to, on a worldview, put it in what would Jesus do? You put it in that kind of context. You put it as family. It's God, family, and then everything else after that. So if you keep it in that order, you'll be fine. But I think you really need to look long term. You need to find some place and somebody that you can work with, somebody that will respect you and treat you like you deserve to be treated. And I know it's not a popular thing, but politics mean absolutely nothing. At the end of the day, we had a girl that worked for us up in Orlando doing the Universal project, and when she found out that the guy who works with me, who runs the company, the D3 Energy for me, he's Billy Graham's great grandson, and found out that, wow, you're not only a Christian but you're a Republican, and you guys are the 2 nicest bosses I've ever had, and you're Republicans, and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, it's nothing to do with the Republican Democrat. We need to kind of put that by the side. You love your brother. You love your neighbor. You treat everybody with respect. And I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, or neither. Work together with everybody. And and put it in, like I said, in order. God, family, everything else. It'll be fine.
And you heard it there first. Lowell Dunn, incredible story, incredible history here at Miami-Dade. The Dunn name is synonymous with Northwest Dade. So we appreciate you coming on, Lowell. And make sure you tune in next Wednesday on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Thank you.
We're powered by Miami Lakes Auto Mall. Thank you to Fred Senra. We appreciate you. They're located at 16600 Northwest 57th Avenue, Miami Lakes. Their phone number is 305-455-3510. A mural sponsor. Lowell, have you ever been in a mayoral office with a mural like this?
I'm telling you, absolutely stunning.
Cool stuff. Local school counselor Grisel Gajano. You can contact her via text 786-353-8608. She did a beautiful job. Very inclusive mural here in my office. The food today for our team was sponsored by Dr. Lemon Ceviche Bar in Miami Lakes. Thank you, Rufino. We really appreciate you. They're located at 7341 Miami Lakes Drive, Miami Lakes, Florida, 305-228-9199. Our film production team, the Matter Lakes Bears Broadcasting Squad. They started with like 4 kids. I think they got like 90 now. And they do a really, really cool job because these kids get not only to meet great guests like you, but they learn real life skills.
Very valuable.
Along the way. And then our roadcaster was donated by Enrique Santos. Appreciate you, Enrique. Harold, appreciate you both. Thank you for donating. It's made a big difference. We had a guest on here a while back who saw that our equipment wasn't up to par, and he literally ran to Sam Ash, picked it up, brought it back. Now they use it at the school for games and everything. The kids get to do a lot of cool stuff with it. So really educational, and thank you to all of our sponsors.